I need to introduce one of our favorite, probably of all time, city council members. But Jan Martin has been, I think anyone who's been paying attention has been, I use the word, the epitome of the selfless elected official in announcing this, and I stand by that. I don't know anyone who has given more, with more joy than Jan, and that's not to say there haven't been big frustrations.
Some days are better than others.
Yeah, and we shared a lot of those frustrations, but anyway, Jan, thank you so much for coming.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. I always joke that my hair was brown when I started 8 years ago. So it's been a great ride for me, and so very interesting. As I was thinking of coming over here today, I was thinking about, you know, when I first ran for office, I had 4 things that I wanted to accomplish, and those 4 things never changed in my 8 years. And one of them was civic engagement, because I've always believed that if we can get the public engaged in our community, there's just nothing that we really can't accomplish. I do believe that. But it's not easy to get people involved. Kono is one of the ways, probably the best ways, and as we think about where, if you read about stories about where communities are going in the future, one of the things you hear is the more and more importance of neighborhoods within a city and the role that they will play as we go forward. So when I first started, Jan Doran, actually I go way back before that with Jan. My first involvement in local politics was this crazy idea we had at the Pioneers Museum to not block the view of the Statue of Y'all. Anybody remember that? I say that'll probably be my legacy. The county was going to build an 8-story courthouse there, right across the street from the museum. And they asked Chuck Murphy and myself, who were on the board at that time, to run over to a commissioner meeting and see if there were some other options. And we were not treated very well at the county commissioners meeting. And both of us left. We were fit to be tied, and we decided we were going to do something about it. I had never been involved in politics. It was my first step even into a public meeting. And to be treated the way that we were that day, I walked away going, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with this picture. This isn't how government's supposed to work. Your government is supposed to be for the people and by the people, right? So if I have a concern, I should be able to go to my elected officials and say, well, it was the beginning of my whole career. And you see where it took me. I was, and if you look at the courthouse today, you won't see an 8-story courthouse across the street from the museum. You see a 2-story entrance and 6 stories over on the Cascade side. So we were able to preserve sort of that corridor, which taught me so much about working in government and really helped to build my personal foundation. I really learned then that a group of people could make a difference. And it was probably the best lesson for me as I decided to later go on and run for city council. I think people oftentimes feel powerless, and it just isn't true. A group of people coming together can accomplish some pretty terrific things. Back to my story about Kono, Jan worked with us on that whole museum thing, is how it got started there. So I knew Jan back in the days when Kono didn't even have an office. Jan was Kono, and when I got on council, it was very interesting how much respect Kono had, and that was basically because of the work that Jan had done. When Kono came to council for a neighborhood issue, whether they were advocating for it or just supporting a neighborhood group, council listened because they understood who Kono was and the value that they brought. There were a couple of years in there, and I know you all would probably agree, where we just didn't hear much from Kono. The advocacy piece just wasn't there. And you know, in the last 4 years, we've had something like 12, and now add another couple, 14 new council members in the last 4 years. So the work that you do and the advocacy that you have, like an organization like Kono, 4 years ago. You've got a whole different group of people today who need to know who you are, and so that they learn to respect and appreciate what the organization does. I think today we see it more and more. We see Kono themselves either coming to advocate or Kono working with neighborhoods to come and advocate on issues. You know, it's just never easy as a council person when you deal with neighborhood issues. You can imagine. The people live in a neighborhood. We had one just the other day about a neighborhood who you're going to be building some apartments close by that the neighbors weren't happy about. Probably the most touchy issues that we deal with, and we spend a lot of time on those. One of the tricks Margaret Radford taught me as a council person was when those issues came to us on council, and let's just say I supported the neighborhood, and I could sense as the conversations were going on and the neighborhood was speaking and the developer was speaking, and you could sense that the vote was going to go against the neighbors. Margaret taught me to kind of try to slow down the process and to say, how about instead of voting today, we send you neighbors back to have one more meeting with the developer, and then come back in 2 weeks and let us know if you could find any compromise. It was a way to try to find something for everybody. Obviously that doesn't always work, but I tell you as neighborhood advocates, if you ever come to council, we really look for you and whoever it is you're arguing against to work together to try to find a solution. We don't want to be the judge and jury. We don't want to be the ones that have to say yes or no in these cases, and we will always encourage you. And it's one of the roles I think Kono has played so well, is they can actually, if it's a neighborhood group, you have an issue, Kono can help guide you through that process. And when you come to council, some things to look forward and some things to say. You know, when you have 200 neighbors get up and repeat the same thing over about a 4-hour period, it does get a little bit old. And yet, if that same group will take the time to put their thoughts together and then maybe say, this is how many of us are here today, rather than each person having to speak, it can really make a difference. But those are the kinds of things that Dave and Kono, one of the roles that they can play. Plus, the louder Kono's voice is, the more advocacy they provide also on these situations. So my respect for Kono is through the roof. I think the future is neighborhoods. And I think we're going to see more and more and more of that in this community, where the neighborhoods is actually where decision-making begins, is in neighborhoods. That's my take on it, and I hope that it's true. You know, Colorado Springs is 200 square miles. 200 square miles. You know, in big cities and back east, they tend to grow up because they're short on space. And so you see a lot of tall buildings, you see dense downtowns. Out here in the west, we have so much land, we have grown out. And it's always cheaper to build out on the outskirts than it is to build inside. But I think that I'm hearing more and more, and council actually has a committee now, an infill committee, talk about the importance of us trying to find a way as a city to encourage infill rather than this continued growth outward. It just has not served us well. We can't afford to maintain the roads we have. And as we continue to grow out there, oftentimes the developer of a new area will put in the roads, but it's up to the city to maintain them, and we just have not been able to keep up with that. So that's one thing I hope that we see in the future. You know, we provide, because it is more expensive to do infill, say down here in the downtown area, because you have to move everything out, you have to work with existing infrastructure and so on. It's my hope that we find some ways to actually encourage that, and whether that is going to require some financial assistance from an infrastructure perspective to help, but anything that the city can do to encourage that, I think will be better. More dense is better. I'm a big transit advocate, and you can't have a bus system that goes around 200 square miles with a few people on a bus, whereas if you get a group of people in a denser area, you'll have an opportunity for better service. So, I don't know, I just really wanted to talk about Kono and my experience, and I thank you all. You guys are the ones that I talk about when I talk about an engaged public. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. And I assume all of you are involved in Kono in one way or another. So
That's probably not true of everybody here, but there are a lot of people
well,
who've been involved.
they should be.
Thank you. Sponsor appreciates your.
Or your neighborhood, right, one or the other. So, as I said, most of my experience with neighborhoods has come through council meetings and the issues have to get pretty bad and get pretty far before they reach us. So, but I encourage people to keep working together until you find a solution. That's the best for everybody. Maybe not everybody gets exactly what they want, but if you can make that work, it's always the best. Are there any questions? I could go on about stuff forever, but I want to try to stay focused sort of on neighborhood things today for Kono.
Well, I'm going to ask a question that I think is probably on everyone's mind.
Yes.
What's next for you?
Yes, I've been asked that question lately. I honestly don't know. You know, this has been truly, genuinely a labor of love for me for the last 8 years. But I cannot even explain the relentless nature of this job. From early in the morning until usually an event of some sort at night. And the phone's ringing. You know, when I started on council, we didn't even have cell phones. That's only 8 years ago. Council was not given a cell phone. Because, and email, I've worked with several older gentlemen back then, didn't even know how to use email. So those issues weren't even a part of our daily lives, and in those 8 years, I probably get close to 100 emails a day. My phone rings constantly, I get text messages. It's just been, it is relentless. There's usually an issue a day, there's always an emergency of some sort that comes up, the press is calling. It's relentless is my word. So when I think about finishing, I actually believe this, that my first thing I'm going to do is take about a month. And I'm going to need to mentally just sort of shift out of this, focus on the city, run all day, every day, into more of a personal space. Now what do I want to do next? I certainly am not done. I have agreed, I've had several requests for boards, and I have told people to call me in 3 months. But I have chosen 3, and because I don't want to just get busy to be busy, and so I want to be very selective. But I've chosen 3. I probably will end up doing more. But the 3 I've chosen that I'll be starting pretty soon is, of course, the Pioneers Museum. It's where I got my start, and so it's where I want to end. The second one is Silver Key. I am absolutely fascinated, and I'm one of them, with this bubble of boomers moving through society in our city. The fastest growing population in Colorado Springs is now the over 65 crowd. And that is only going to continue to grow, and I'm just fascinated with it. As a baby boomer, we have changed society at every phase of our lives because there's so many of us moving through. And I anticipate we're going to do the same thing in this silver tsunami that's coming. And so I kind of I just wanted to be in on that and sort of work with an organization who's really focused on that and see how we can impact that. And my third one is I have agreed to join the Rocky Mountain PBS board up in Denver, actually, which will be a lot of fun. I'll be out of the city, and it'll be a chance for me to meet some new people and be a part of that. So those are my 3 boards, and for now, that's it. It's plenty.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And where do you see us as a city 10 years from now? And where would you like to see us 10 years from now?
I ran for office for only one reason, and I'm a native of Colorado Springs, born and raised here. I believe that Colorado Springs has the most potential of any city in the state. I think we should be the crown jewel of the state. And we just never quite seem to reach our potential. And when I ran, I said, all I want is to help this city reach its full potential. Well, in my 8 years, Gary, we had the worst economic downturn of my life. That was my first 4 years. And the second 4 years was this whole upheaval with the change of government. So I will always regret I wasn't a little more effective in being able to help move us in that direction. That will still be my hope for this city. The potential is unlimited for Colorado Springs. Like I say, we should just be, we should be the crown jewel in the state of Colorado. And we aren't. We look at statistics, we look at economic statistics, we look at jobs, and we're